March 13th, 1997, Phoenix, Arizona, 8:30 p.m. A formation of lights appears over the city, silent, massive, moving slowly south. The phones at the local news stations begin ringing. Hundreds of calls, then thousands. People pulling their cars over on the freeway to watch. People standing in their backyards, looking up, unable to explain what they are seeing. People crying. By the time it was over, an estimated 10,000 people had seen it. Across a path stretching from the Nevada border to the outskirts of Tucson, hundreds of miles, hundreds of videos. One of the most witnessed UFO events in American history. The governor of Arizona held a press conference. He brought out an aide dressed in an alien costume. He laughed. He mocked the witnesses. He called it a case of mass hysteria. 10 years later, that same governor gave an interview and said he had seen it too. He said he had seen it that night, over his own home, and that he had been afraid, and that he had used humor at the press conference because he did not know what else to do. This is the Phoenix Lights, the night an entire American city looked up, and the government that watched it happen chose to laugh. Section 2. The Night. March 13th, 1997, 7:30 p.m., Henderson, Nevada. The Phoenix Lights did not begin in Phoenix. They began in Henderson, Nevada, just outside Las Vegas, at approximately 7:30 p.m. A retired police officer named Bill Greiner was outside when he saw a formation of lights moving southeast. He described it as a formation of craft moving in a V shape, silent, slow, enormous. He watched it for several minutes before it disappeared from his line of sight, moving toward Arizona. At around 8:15 p.m., witnesses in Prescott, Arizona began reporting the same thing. A triangular or V-shaped formation of lights, moving at low altitude. Prescott is north of Phoenix, a small city, not a place where mass hysteria is the default explanation. Multiple witnesses there described the craft as blocking out the stars behind it, not lights in the sky. A structure, moving through the sky, large enough to occlude the stars. By 8:30 p.m., the formation had reached the Phoenix metropolitan area, and that is when the phone calls began. Over Phoenix Drive, Lynne Kitei is a physician. She was living in Phoenix in 1997. She had been photographing the lights for months before March 13th, smaller appearances that she had documented privately, not knowing what she was seeing. On the night of March 13th, she photographed the main formation from her home. Her photographs are among the most documented visual evidence from that night. She described a craft so large that it blocked out a significant portion of the sky above her neighborhood, and completely silent. Tim Lay and his family were in their home in northwest Phoenix. They watched the formation pass directly over their house. Tim later drew a sketch of what he saw, a massive V-shape with 5 lights arranged along its leading edge. He described it as approximately a mile wide, moving at perhaps 30 miles per hour. At an altitude he estimated at perhaps 1,000 feet, and completely, totally silent. That last detail comes up again and again in the witness accounts. A craft of that size, moving at that altitude, should produce significant noise. Jets, helicopters, conventional aircraft, they all produce sound. The Phoenix Lights produced none. Witness after witness said the same thing. Whatever was over Phoenix that night moved through the air in complete silence. That detail alone eliminates most conventional explanations. Section 3. The Videos and Military. The Evidence. The Phoenix Lights were documented on video by multiple independent witnesses. The footage from that night exists. Multiple angles, multiple neighborhoods, all showing the same formation. This is not one blurry video from one witness. This is a body of visual documentation that, when reviewed together, tells a consistent story. A V-shaped or triangular formation, moving slowly south through the Phoenix area. Silent, low, massive. Luke Air Force Base is located in the West Phoenix metropolitan area, one of the busiest military aviation facilities in the Southwest United States, home to F-16 fighter aircraft, trained pilots, radar systems. On the night of March 13th, the base was operational. The Air Force said nothing about the Phoenix lights for months. When they finally responded to media pressure, they said the lights had been flares. A 10 aircraft from the Maryland Air National Guard had dropped illumination flares over the Barry M. Goldwater Range, a military training area south of Phoenix. Case closed. Flares. Nothing unusual. There are several problems with this explanation. The first is timing. The flare drop occurred at approximately 10 p.m. The primary Phoenix Lights formation, the one witnessed by thousands of people, passed through the city between 8:15 and 8:45 p.m., more than an hour before the flares were dropped. The flares are real, but they happened after the main event. They do not explain the main event. The second problem is geography. The Barry M. Goldwater Range is south and southwest of Phoenix. Witnesses in Prescott, north of Phoenix, describe the formation at 8:15 p.m., moving south toward Phoenix. Flares do not travel from Prescott to Phoenix. Flares do not move north to south over hundreds of miles. Flares hang in the air and fall. They do not fly. The scale. Multiple witnesses attempted to calculate the size of the primary craft. Using triangulation, comparing the angular size of the formation to known distances and landmarks, researchers have estimated the primary craft at between half a mile and a mile in width. For context, a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier is approximately 1/5 of a mile long. The formation that passed over Phoenix that night may have been 5 times the size of the largest warship in the United States Navy. If those size estimates are correct, this was the largest object ever observed in American airspace by civilian witnesses. And Luke Air Force Base, 1 mile from where thousands of people were watching it, said nothing. Section 4. The Governor. Governor Fife Symington III. Fife Symington was the governor of Arizona in 1997, a Republican, a former U.S. Air Force officer, a man with no obvious motive to claim UFO encounters. When the Phoenix Lights became a public issue, his office received hundreds of calls. His response was a press conference. At that press conference, an aide walked out wearing an alien costume. Symington laughed. The room laughed. He called on Maricopa County officials and said he had found the culprit. The joke landed. The press moved on. The story faded. For 10 years, that was the official position of the state of Arizona. The Phoenix Lights were a joke. The witnesses were confused. Then, in 2007, Governor Symington gave an interview to CNN and said something that changed the conversation permanently. "I am a pilot and I know just about every machine that flies. It was enormous and it just felt otherworldly. In your gut, you could just tell it was in a class by itself." He had seen it. That night in 1997, while his office was fielding calls and his administration was preparing a press conference to mock the witnesses, Fife Symington had stood outside his home and watched the same formation pass overhead. He said he had been shocked. He said he had been, in his own word, unsettled. And he said he had used humor at the press conference because he could not figure out what else to do. Because he was the governor, and he had no answer. He also said something about the press conference that deserves to be heard directly. "I wanted people to lighten up and calm down, so I introduced a fellow in an alien costume. But there was nothing funny about what the people of Arizona saw. What I saw. It was real, and it was there." A former U.S. Air Force officer, the governor of Arizona, who had watched it pass over his own home, and who spent 10 years saying nothing, because, in his own words, he did not know what to say. That is not the behavior of someone who saw flares. That is the behavior of someone who saw something they could not explain. Section 5. The Federal Response. Here is what the United States federal government's official response to the Phoenix Lights amounted to. Flares. Dropped an hour after the primary event, in a different location, and nothing else. Luke Air Force Base, operationally active on March 13, 1997, never scrambled aircraft to investigate a formation of lights that thousands of citizens were reporting over their city. The FAA said radar did not confirm the formation, but multiple witnesses, including pilots, described an object large enough to block out stars. An object at low altitude, over a major metropolitan area, and the official response was flares, dropped an hour later in a different location. In 2018, filmmaker James Fox produced a documentary called The Phenomenon. In researching that film, he obtained a statement from Dr. Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Mitchell was an Apollo 14 astronaut, the sixth man to walk on the moon. He described his belief, based on his own private investigations over decades, that UFOs represent genuine, non-human craft. He said the Phoenix Lights was among the cases he found most significant. Not because of the videos, not because of the photographs, because of the witnesses. When 10,000 people see the same thing, Mitchell said, that is not hysteria. That is data. Section 6. Honest Debunking. Because this is Vantage Elite, we go through what the skeptics say. Honestly. The flare explanation. The flare explanation is real, in part. A 10 aircraft from the Maryland Air National Guard did drop flares over the Barry M. Goldwater Range on the night of March 13th. Witnesses in the Estrella Mountain area south of Phoenix did see those flares. Some of the footage from that night, specifically the footage of lights hovering in a line on the southern horizon, does appear to show flares. This is a legitimate explanation for that portion of the sightings. It deserves to be stated clearly. The misidentification possibility. Skeptics argue that the primary formation, the V-shaped craft seen over Phoenix, may have been a flight of aircraft, specifically a flight of Learjets that were reportedly in the area that night. At night, a formation of aircraft with their lights visible could appear as a single formation to observers unfamiliar with aviation. This is a legitimate observation. What the skeptical explanations cannot account for. The flares were dropped at 10 p.m. The primary formation passed through at 8:15 to 8:45 p.m. The flares explain the later sighting. They do not explain the earlier one. The Learjet formation explanation requires believing that trained pilots, including military-experienced observers, could not distinguish multiple aircraft from a single structured object blocking out stars. The silence. Multiple witnesses specifically noted that the formation was completely silent. A flight of Learjets is not silent. The star occultation. Multiple witnesses described the formation blocking out stars behind it, indicating a solid structure, not lights. A formation of aircraft does not block stars. Governor Symington, a former Air Force officer, who saw it, who described it as otherworldly, who spent 10 years not saying that. That is not someone who saw a flight of Learjets. The flare explanation explains part of the Phoenix Lights. It does not explain the primary formation. And a former governor of Arizona has said under his own name that what he saw was real. Section 7. Ending. Dr. Lynne Kitei has spent over 2 decades documenting the Phoenix Lights. She wrote a book. She produced a documentary. She has interviewed hundreds of witnesses. She is a physician, a woman trained in evidence and skepticism, who saw something she cannot explain, and who decided that the responsible thing to do was to investigate it honestly rather than dismiss it. The witnesses from March 13, 1997, are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s now. Their accounts have not changed. They saw what they saw, 10,000 of them, across hundreds of miles, on a clear spring evening in Arizona. Fife Symington died in 2023. In the years after his 2007 interview, he gave multiple additional statements about that night. He never retracted his account. He consistently described what he had seen as something he could not explain, as something real, as something that deserved serious attention rather than the joke he had made of it in 1997. Here is what stays with me about the Phoenix Lights. It is not the videos. It is not the photographs. It is not even the scale. It is the governor. Because every UFO case has witnesses, but almost none of them have a governor, a former Air Force officer, the chief executive of a state, who saw the same thing 10,000 of his citizens saw, who mocked them publicly, who stayed silent for a decade, and who finally said, on camera, on the record, that he had been wrong, that they had not been hysterical, that what they saw was real. Over Phoenix, Arizona, on March 13, 1997, something passed through the sky. 10,000 people looked up. The government said, flares. The governor said, I saw it too, and whatever it was, it has never been explained. Subscribe to Vantage Elite for cases like this, documented, verified, done properly. Drop a comment. If 10,000 witnesses and a governor are not enough, what would be? And I will see you in the next one.